Hello, everybody. This is Georgianne Hughes, and this is the Byte Show. And we're very blessed to have with us Olaf Hage. And as many of you know, Olaf is a brilliant researcher, and boy, can he connect the dots. I'll tell you. Anyway, you can get a hold of Olaf Hage if you so desire by writing to him at Post Office Box 427, Brunswick, Maine, and the abbreviation for Maine is ME. The zip code is 04011. Please visit Olaf's personal website, TheTimeQuest.com. All one word, TheTimeQuest.com. And don't forget to visit Before 2012 and Beyond.com. That's Before, BEFORE 2012 and Beyond.com. You will find Olaf's audio files there that you can listen to immediately for a small fee, and they're well worth it. There's a lot of fascinating and groundbreaking information. So we're going to talk about diamonds tonight, and this is going to take you, the listener, to some very strange places in this universe. Hi, Olaf.
Hi, Georgianne.
How you doing?
I'm as brilliant as a diamond tonight.
Oh, boy.
No, I'm just kidding. But I do want to talk about diamonds because I keep running into diamonds.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly. I mean, if I were actually running into diamonds, I'd be cut to shreds.
Oh, dear.
Diamonds are the hardest thing that we know of. I mean, diamonds will cut just about everything else.
Yeah.
And the ancients apparently knew that. And you know what they called diamonds?
No.
Adamantine.
Adamantine.
Yeah, Adam, Antine. And adamantine was or one of the names for diamonds. And they had actually that's sort of the medieval English version of the Greek and Latin words. But it comes from the idea that Adam, who, as you know, is the first sinner. Eve was kind of tricked by Adam into thinking that touching the tree of life, or tree of knowledge, I should say, would kill her. And when she discovered a serpent entwined around it, she said, "Gee, I guess it doesn't."
Yeah, something like that.
So she didn't believe the first part of what he told her either, but that part was true. So she got hornswoggled by Adam and the serpent. They kind of worked together as a tag team match, and it was very unfair, and they pinned her. But anyway, Adam got sentenced to hell, or Hades, according to the Greek legend on this, and he became the judge of Hades, and his judgment was very hard and severe, because the theory went, I guess, that if he was judged so harshly, then so would everybody else be. And after all, I was just trying to save Eve, I was just trying to keep her from touching the tree. I don't get no respect down here in Hades.
Yeah.
So he was sentenced down there, and he became the judge of hell because he was the first guy in there. So everybody else, lacked seniority. You
mean like hell, like in the grave, or hell like?
This is sort of a strange place. The hell of the Greeks was not the hell of the 2nd and 3rd century writers, which I've gone into. I got this hellfire. I don't know if it's still up on the web or not. I don't know if you can still listen to that. I know some of these things get taken down after a while. Chance to listen to them, and then they're gone until they end up. I don't know what we're going to do with them. Yeah, but anyway, I have this Hellfire series over on Before 2012 and Beyond.com, where we go into that hell, the the one with the fire and the pitchforks and all that silliness, and where that really came from.
Dante.
No. Dante's a very late comer in that game. He's over 1,000 years after it was invented.
Oh my goodness.
But the apostles in the New Testament didn't have anything to do with it. It's something that somebody else came up with, and I go into the history of that. But anyway, the Greeks had a different view of it. Hades, which was their hell, if you will, was a place where the dead went. Everybody, everybody went to Hades. It was the kind of custodial, ever after place for souls. And unless you became a god, or unless you were in some other way revived, that was apparently where you were going to end up. So, but anyway, and that's a kind of a crude statement, because there are many different Greek philosophies. I studied all this stuff in college, and there's probably as many as there were philosophers, theories about exactly what happened to you after you died. But anyway, the idea was that there was this stern judge, and they called him Adeimantus, obviously based upon the name Adam ultimately, and Adam coming from the Hebrew word for blood. And the Aleph, the number one, or the front, the first blood, or first blush, or first guilt, first sinner, that idea. And he receives that name after he sins, technically. If you study the Hebrew text of Genesis, you can see that he first is called Ish, and then God gives him the name Adam later on. Yeah. Just like Eve was first called Isha or Ishet, and then later Adam gives her the name Ava, or as we call her now, Eve. So there is this kind of association of the name with the first sinner, hence the first guy to go down into the shades of Hades, and there to become a stern judge over everybody who enters. As the first guy at the door, he gets to judge everybody else who follows him. And so the idea was that he was a merciless judge. We would call him a hanging judge. The kind of judge whose gavel comes down hard on the judge's bench, constantly saying, death, because that's, after all, where you were going. You were going to live among, or if you will, be amongst the dead.
Yeah.
So this was the basic idea. And the word adamantine came to signify the hardest element, the hardest material that they knew, which was the diamond. And the idea that it could cut everything else, but nothing could cut it, is sort of like a really primitive version of paper, stone, and scissors, So there was this gem that got this reputation and got called adamantine. And I have a habit of going back over old research. I guess it's born of the fact that I've made so many mistakes over my life that I've had to go back and revisit things. You get old enough, you get the habit of going back and rechecking things and re-researching things. So I fished out one of my older books. Well, it's not an old book, but a book that I had gone through a long time ago. It's over 10 years old, that I had been researching some myths and legends in. And I came across something in there. And now that I've given you this background, it's going to make more sense. This is a book called Star Myths of the Greeks and Romans, a source book by Theone Kondos. And this was actually from her doctoral dissertation. And she'd gone into Eratosthenes and other ancient texts and really studied thoroughly what their particular views on the myths and legends, stories, especially the astrological signs were. And she went to, what was then astrology, which is today astronomy, but the stories are, the Greek myths and legends about them. And the constellation of Perseus, she wrote this, and she said on page 157 of her book, she said that it is said that this constellation was placed among the stars because of Perseus's fame. Zeus came to Danae, Danae is a female, in the form of golden rain and fathered Perseus by her. When Perseus was sent against the Gorgons, this is a three-headed monster, by Polydectes, who was king of Serapis, I think it was. When Perseus was sent against the Gorgons, Hermes gave him his own helmet and sandals with which he was able to fly. Hephaestus is said to have given Perseus a diamond wallet. Let's see here. I'm going to skip a few items here. I want to go down here. He attacked the Gorgons while they slept and beheaded Medusa. Now, Perseus is holding Medusa in his left hand and a sword in his right hand in the constellation up in the sky.
And he has that horse, Pegasus.
Well, not in that picture.
Okay.
I'm not going to get into Pegasus at all, so we can set him aside. But he's got a diamond wallet, a helmet, and sandals given to him by Hermes. And then it says that thereafter, Athena wore the head of Medusa on her breast. She granted to Perseus a place among the stars where he is visible holding the Gorgon's head. Okay, well, that sounds interesting. And then she goes into another version of the story. And these are just various versions of the story. And this was on the next page, 158. I'm just reading a little bits of this, but it's important to see the connections here. You'll see it in a second here. Perseus was placed among the stars because of his courage and because he was conceived in an unusual manner. He was sent by Polydectes, the son of Magnes, against the Gorgons. But Mercury, who loved him greatly, gave him winged sandals, a cap, and in particular a helmet, which rendered him invisible to his opponents. The Greeks said that the helmet belonged to Hades, the invisible one. Perseus did not utilize the helmet of Orcus, as some claim in ignorance. No educated person could find this interpretation acceptable. I don't know what that means, because I didn't know Orcus had a helmet, but Orcus is the big fish. Leave him aside, too. Perseus was said to have received from Vulcan a knife made of adamant, with which he killed the Gorgon Medusa. A deed no one has described, she says here. Okay. Let me skip ahead a little bit further here. And it says here, Perseus easily slew the Gorgon as she slept. Minerva placed the head of the Gorgon on her breastplate. Okay. A certain Euhemerus, which means, I think it means good day, but I got my Greek's a little hazy there, but I think that's what it means anyway, says the Gorgon was slain by Minerva. Now, isn't that odd? Okay, so I'm not done here. On page 159, she says that the Gorgons were girded with serpents and had wings and brazen claws. Wings? They could fly? So you got a three-headed monster here that could fly, and it's got serpents and claws. What does that sound like? Doesn't that sound like a dragon?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I should think so. of the three Gorgons, Medusa was mortal, the other two were immortal. Okay. Anyway, we got one more in here, I think. Yeah, there we go. And on page 160, we have this one. Perseus received a shield or mirror from Athena and a sickle from Hermes. But the sandals, wallet, and helmet he received from a certain nymph, whom he reached by consulting some the guardians of the Gorgons. Okay. And then finally, it says here, the constellation itself may be of Phoenician or Egyptian origin. To the Babylonians, this constellation represented a male figure named Sugi, S-U-G-I, the old man. Now, the U there, that's an English U. In Babylonian, that probably is another letter. But old man is Sugi, and I think our word sage, S-A-G-E, is wise old man, probably is related to that.
Yeah.
Okay, now, see what we got here. We have the following. We have Minerva, Athena, Hermes, Mercury, Vulcan, Hephaestus. Let's see, did I leave anybody out here? I think that's everybody. Okay, so we got all of these different people giving him stuff. And Perseus is being equipped very well by a whole bunch of gods and goddesses, right?
Yeah.
Wrong.
Oh.
All of those gods and goddesses are the same being,
Oh.
Phoenicia.
Oh, my goodness.
And Egypt. And in Egypt, that would be Thoth. And when you translate, I know some people are going to say, oh, no, Athena and Minerva aren't the same ones, but yes, they are. And when you go back to the original version, which is in Phoenicia, or if you will, the ancient Jewish tradition, and the being in question is the angel Raphael.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Now, here's something interesting. You see, what most people don't get is that we don't have a planet associated with Athena. In spite of Velikovsky's valiant attempt to identify Athena with the planet Venus, there is a story of the Golden Apple, and it was going to be awarded by Paris to one of, to the most beautiful one of all. He was going to give it, and there was Aphrodite, which is Venus, vying for it, and there was Hera, the wife of Zeus, who was vying for it, and there was Athena, who was vying for it. She too wanted it. Now they're all three competing for it, so they can't be the same person if they're adversaries. So Athena and Aphrodite, or Venus, can't be the same person. And if Velikovsky had known his mythology, he would have realized that. And of course, he was thoroughly chastised for that, but he refused to give in because he was right. But he was wrong, of course. But in his mind, he was right. So the question is, what planet was associated with Athena? Well, the key to this is to understand what happened to the planet Mercury. And the planet Mercury, Velikovsky eventually broke down and realized had, in fact, been involved in close encounters with the Earth in ancient times. And other people eventually realized that as well. All they had to do, you can go to my website and you can look. I've got a segment there that I have on the what's going to happen to Mars, and in there I quote from the Gilgamesh epic. Now this is a flood story that was uncovered in the 19th century, but this flood story is from Babylon, and it's this ancient, actually Sumerian story, ultimately. But it's about this king who goes and visits the Utnapishtim, who is actually the guy we would call Noah, as in the deluge.
Yeah.
And he goes to talk to this guy, and he makes a kind of a pilgrimage to speak to him. Now, you remember the story in Genesis says that Noah lived for centuries after the flood.
Right.
So the idea is that Gilgamesh was alive during that period, and he could go talk to him.
Yeah.
See, that was the basis of the legend. So he goes back to talk to him. Now, the truth is, Gilgamesh lived around 2200, 2300 BC, according to most estimates. I don't know if that's true or not, but according to most estimates. But anyway, the idea was he was talking to Noah, and he goes and he gets this story of the flood, and they record this in the legend. Well, it says that at the time of the deluge, that Adad and Nergal were coming by the earth and were knocking down the pillars of the earth. Now, that doesn't make any sense to us. So let me translate it into modern language. Mercury and Mars were coming by the earth and changing the four directions of northeast, south, and west, which means they had to get really close to fiddle with what direction northeast, south, and west were.
Yeah.
Okay? That meant that they were gravitationally twisting the earth around on its axis. And so what the ancients were basically saying was that at the time of the flood, the Gilgamesh flood, that the planet Mars and the planet Mercury both came very close to the Earth at the same time, and this caused a terrible destruction of the planet. Well, whether you believe in all of this or not, the point I'm getting at is if Mercury got that close to us, it was in danger of going outside of our orbit, going beyond us. And in fact, we now know they've done computer reconstructions of the orbits of Mercury and Mars and the other planets, and they found that these two planets are the most unstable of the 8 major planets. And of course, Pluto and everything out there is unstable because it's part of the Kuiper Belt. But the 8 major planets ending with Neptune, the planets Mercury and Mars are very erratic in their orbits, comparatively speaking, and Mercury especially so. Venus, on the other hand, Velikovsky's candidate for causing the plagues of the Exodus and all kinds of other havoc, is one of the most stable objects we know of. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It's upside down, but other than that, it seems to be stable. And Jupiter, of course, because it's so huge, just sits there like a big lump on the log, not going anywhere. So of all the objects near us, the most unstable of all, and often the most closest to us, is Mercury. And it's hard to appreciate this, but you realize that if Venus is on the other side of the sun, or anywhere about there, Mercury comes around to this side where we are, and you've got Mercury closer to the Earth than any other planet. And we don't appreciate that fact. But we will someday, because according to the computer reconstructions, Mercury is going to leave that orbit and is going to come out past the Earth. That if you run it forward in time, now it's going to take, according to the projections, millions of years, but it will come out and pay us another visit. So for those who think that Mercury is a nice, stable object, is behaving itself down there near the sun, and we don't have to worry about it, well, maybe not right away, but that is a dangerous object, and it is erratic. And the ancients said that Mercury had a helmet of invisibility because it would get so close to the sun you couldn't see it. And for a long period of time, they couldn't find it. And then it would pop up in a strange location. And that's because its orbit is not only is it unpredictable, even the scientists found that it was unpredictable, and it became one of the proofs of Einstein's theory of relativity that it predicted that Mercury would be unstable. So this is an object that is kind of scary in many ways. Now, Mars is out there. It's in a more stable orbit than Mercury is in. but it too is not going to stay where we see it, and it hasn't always been where it is now. And now further proof of that came last summer. In June of 2008, there were 3 articles published in the British journal Nature. This is a cover story there, which is, that's the most prestigious scientific publication in the world. And 3 articles were published in the British journal Nature on Mars and what hit it.
Yes.
And they argued that an object at least 1,000 miles in diameter had hit Mars at an angle between 30 and 60 degrees. The last time I checked, the middle of that's about a 45-degree angle. That's a kind of a ping-pong ball bouncing off a Mars angle. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's a 45-degree angle. I doubt seriously that an object 1,000 miles in diameter is buried inside of Mars after hitting it at that angle.
Yeah.
In fact, at 30 degrees, I would be willing to bet everything I've got that didn't happen. So what I think happened is that it hit Mars and bounced off. So it's still out there. Okay? Now, if you hit something, you don't go faster. You slow down.
Yeah, no fooling.
Transferred some energy to it, unless it depends on what angle you hit it at, and it depends on, there's you could graze something, and if you're small enough and you swing around it, you might accelerate. But this object, my guess is, lost momentum, and therefore should be somewhere inside the orbit of Mars, between Mars and the Sun. You know, where we are, somewhere in here. And that object was a big object because it left a crater on Mars, according to these articles, between 4,000 miles wide and 6,600 miles long. Now, that's pretty substantial on a planet that's only 4,200 miles in diameter.
Yeah.
Okay. It left a crater that covers basically the entire top half of the planet.
Oh.
But at the time, that was not the top half of Mars. That was the side.
Oh, my goodness.
It hit it on the equator, which means that object is in orbit around the Sun, in an orbit just like ours. And it's an object that could come by the Earth. Okay? So whatever hit Mars must be in that kind of orbit, and it must have bounced off, because an object that big is not going to vaporize, with that kind of impact. It's going to bounce off. It's too. It's like General Motors. It's too big to be destroyed. You got to save it somehow. There's a conservation of angular momentum here. That thing's just going to. It's going to do a lot of damage, and it did. But they thought it would be a Kuiper belt object. Now, a Kuiper belt object is supposedly a kind of a big comet, a super comet, that's temporarily parked out somewhere around Neptune or beyond, and in an unstable place like Pluto and all the rest of those objects out there. They're unstable. And they can come plunging into the solar system whenever they feel like it, more or less, or anything that happens that disturbs them. And trust me, a lot of things disturb them. And they can come plunging down here and pay the inner planets a visit. And as proof of that, we go look at another part of Mars, the Hellas Basin. Now, that's just below what is now the equator of Mars. And the Hellas Basin was hit by an object at least 100 miles in diameter. I want you to picture 100 miles. Think of how long it would take you to drive that far. Now imagine an object that big in every direction. Think of how much that must weigh. If you've ever lifted a rock, a real boulder, or tried to, and you would realize how much weight there is in a 100-mile diameter rock. Really heavy. Okay, that thing hit Mars, and it must have been traveling pretty fast because the momentum of that impact went right through Mars. Well, actually, it didn't go through it. It can't go through it, but it went around Mars. What happens is it sends out an impact wave that spreads out like you drop a pebble in a lake, and it spreads out concentric rings.
Ripples. Yeah.
Ripples of energy, if you will, rippling the surface of Mars, went around the planet. And they met on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
Okay, now you had a convention of ripples on the far side of Mars. And when they got together, they had a really hot time because you see all that energy that was generated from that impact and that spread out from those ripples met together all at the same spot on the far side of the planet and melted the rock there. And melted it so much that it melted it down into the core, and it created volcanoes, which are now the largest volcanoes in the solar system, so far as we know. And that created also one of the highest, or probably the highest mountain in the solar system, called Olympus Mons. Now, this is the kind of thing that happens when you've got an impact on a planet. Okay, I think I got that right there. I could be confusing that with another spot on Mars, but this is what happens when you get these big impacts. Now, 65 million years ago, the scientists say, we were hit by an object, a large comet, probably another Kuiper Belt object, and it struck probably in the Yucatan. But they're now thinking that this thing fragmented like Shoemaker-Levy, the comet that crashed into Jupiter back in July 16th of 1994. And it broke into a bunch of pieces, and 4 main fragments hit the Earth. And the biggest one hit the Yucatan, which is Mayan country down there in southern Mexico as you're heading towards South America. And in the Yucatan region, and actually a little bit offshore, there's this large concentric circle impact crater region, and from 65 million years ago. And then there's another one up in, I think it's up in Canada, and another pair over in Asia, and it's this great circle route going around the world where this thing apparently broke it up and was hitting the Earth. Now, the fact that it broke up probably means that it came by the Earth really close and was fragmented by our gravity, and then it got kind of hooked into us and came back and paid us a second visit. This happens a lot. Our moon is the product of just such an encounter where we got grazed by something and it came back and hit us full on. And that then generated the moon out of the impact. And then we've got Shoemaker-Levy itself, which hit Jupiter after first coming close to it and being broken up by Jupiter's gravity, and it came back around, and then the pieces, the fragments, 21 pieces, hit Jupiter on the 9th of Ab on the Hebrew calendar, which is an interesting day because it has to do with the candelabra in the temple, the menorah, that had 7 candles on it, representing the sun, the moon, and 5 planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And of course, Saturn stood for the 7th day or the Sabbath. And the first day was the sun day. That candle never went out. That was considered the servant candle that remained lit all the time, whereas the other candles, which were fed by the same oil for the base, but the other candles were extinguished on Saturday night at sundown, and then they started all over again and lit 1 candle a day. Starting at Sunday night at sundown, they would light the moon candle and so forth until they went through the entire day. And so only 1 day a week did they have all 7 candles lit, and that was the Sabbath. And then on Sunday, they put out, or Saturday evening, they put out 6 of the 7 candles and left the 7 candles burning. So on the day of the 9th of Ab in 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar is laying siege to the city of Jerusalem, and mysteriously, even though they had enough oil, the Sunday candle went out. The candle for the first day of the week went out. And so they had darkness in the temple. And this was considered a great omen because the temple didn't have any windows. It wasn't like the wind was going to blow it out or anything. And so they had plenty of oil. They couldn't figure out what happened. So as far as they were concerned, the priest felt this was a miracle and a sign from God. And 10 years later, Nebuchadnezzar burned down the temple. So if your temple candelabra goes out, it's a bad sign. All right? Well, in the year 70, on the 9th of Ab again, the candles went out. And so, and again, it was the sun candle that was extinguished. And no other candles were lit, so you lost all of the candles that day because the sun candle goes, nothing else will light. And so at that point, again, they had plenty of oil. There were priests around, although it was a much more difficult siege situation. And on that occasion, once again, they lost all the light inside the temple. And that was 666 years to the exact day after they'd gone out under the Babylonians. So at this point, this was a very ominous moment, and this time under a Roman siege. And within a few weeks after that, the temple burned, and before you knew it, the temple was dismantled in the spring of 71. This is something that I need to mention because Jesus makes a number of prophecies about, what's going to happen when the temple is destroyed and so forth. And everybody counts it from the year 70, and even from some foolish people from Passover of 70. But the year 70 is the wrong year because it was not Passover of 70 that these things happened. But these things happened starting in the late summer or midsummer, really, of 70. And the temple, there was a fire, but they were using the temple as a prison for 40,000 prisoners of war, the Romans were, after they won the victory. And there was no Yom Kippur service that year because the Romans had conquered them before the High Holy Days. And so they had all these Jewish captives, and they then had to dismantle the temple. And we know that the temple building was torn down, and all the walls and all the enclosures and everything, and the Temple Mount was leveled. So when Jesus made the prophecy, see all these stones here, there will not be one left upon another, will be thrown down. Well, it was the Jewish people themselves who had to dismantle those stones. Now, I'm sure the Roman soldiers came in when it came time to dismantle the front side of the eastern face of the temple facade, because that was that stone section was embedded with concrete that had precious jewels like diamonds and rubies and sapphires and emeralds and all kinds of things embedded in it, which made it, if you will, adamantine. But it made it very desirable in the eyes of the Romans, so they wanted to go in there and kind of use their swords to pick those gems out of the front facade of the temple. But other than those stones, all of the big heavy lifting was certainly done by the Jewish captives. So they had 40,000 people who were recruited to work at dismantling the temple itself. And so they tore down their own temple in the spring of 71. And this is what, and they would have wanted to do that because they wouldn't want pagan Roman hands doing this. So they were, I think, not eager to do it, but they were certainly willing to do it in preference to having the Roman soldiers all over it. So it was 71 that this happened, and spring of 71 is the date that you want to look at. That would be the Passover if you want to count 40 years or whatever you want to do there, which is one of many, many arguments that I have shown for the dating of the crucifixion to the year 31 and those prophecies of Jesus to the year 31 and not to the year 30, as so many have, I think, mistakenly assumed. And this is what I mean. You have to go through it. I've gone over this many times over the years because it's a controversial position, and I go back and I recheck it. I go back and I research. So diamonds are very important in this whole context. Diamonds are the gemstone of, I believe it's Zebulun, which is Virgo in our calendar. And Virgo is mentioned in Revelation 12. And you'll notice in Revelation 12, it talks about this virgin or this woman in heaven who's about to give birth, and the sun is clothing her, the moon is beneath her feet. And this can only be the sign of Virgo. There's nothing else in the heavens that would answer to that description. And the only time that description fits around the time that Jesus was born, which is what is describing there, is September 10th or 11th, depending on what part of the Hebrew day you're looking at, of 3 B.C. And in fact, that particular moment specifically would be around sundown on September 10th of 3 B.C. So here is the book of Revelation pinning down a specific hour or so that this event would have occurred. That's giving the birth of Jesus to a really fine amount of detail. And here is the sign of the diamond. In other words, this is Virgo is the diamond. It's the hardest stone, and it cuts all other stones, but it cannot be cut by any other stone. And we're told that there's a stone not made by human hands, that is cut out without hands, and which will crush all other stones. Back in Daniel, there's this prophecy, and I thought, what's interesting about this is that that's a perfect metaphor for Jesus, of course, as the prophecy has often been interpreted by Christian interpreters. But the diamond is also the perfect gemstone to represent that. And how interesting that Adam, the first sinner, the first man to have the breath of God breathed into his nostrils to become a living being, is related to a diamond. And then here we have Christ also symbolized by a diamond here in as it were, through Virgo and through one of the tribes of Israel. Now, he wasn't descendant of that particular tribe, but Virgo represents Eve, just as Leo represents Adam. And Leo also represents, therefore, the tribe of Judah. And that's because the throne of Adam and Eve is handed down. Now, Adam and Eve are reckoned as a couple, and hence like a king and queen because they shared dominion back in Genesis. So they have a throne that they can hand down, and you can see how that throne handed down comes forward, and the next two signs are Libra and Scorpio. Now, Libra was originally the claws of the scorpion, and you can go around the zodiac, and originally they were sets of a pair of male and female signs, which were coupled together as a single concept. So the scorpion and its claws were a female scorpion and her male claws. And Virgo and Leo represented Eve and Adam, respectively. So when you see the Sphinx over in Egypt and you look at it, you see the lion, but it looks like it's got the head of a woman on it, the body of a lion.
Yeah.
Well, it's been interpreted as the cusp or the joining together of Leo and Virgo.
Yeah.
And that would be the head where the crown of 12 stars is in Revelation 12, but together they are Adam and Eve. So they represent, if you will, the starting point. Obviously no longer the starting point of the zodiac. Things have changed considerably since that time. But and then you have the scorpion facing them with the claws reaching toward what? Toward the feet of the woman. Toward the feet of Virgo. So the feet of Virgo, the claws are trying to grab at her. Now, you recall that I said that the Gorgon had wings and claws. Okay?
Yeah.
And serpents associated with it. Well, the word Scorpio comes from scarab.
Yes.
Which is a beetle.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. It's a beetle, it's a scorpion, it's an insect, but then we have the carob. Now, the Ish-Carob is a man carob. Now we're getting closer to the crux of this. A carob is a cherub. A carob is shining, horned, winged, pillar, up, vertical, okay?
Yeah.
A horned pillar. Now, a horned pillar sounds a little weird until you understand what a carob really is.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a pillar with a serpent entwined around it and wings at the top. Now, you've got your serpent, you've got your wings, and what you've got there is a caduceus.
Yes.
Okay, now the caduceus is the symbol of Mercury or Hermes.
Mm-hmm.
Mercury or Hermes in the Hebrew pantheon would be Raphael. We're back where we started.
Yeah.
You see, the angel Raphael was a cherub. He was an angel, and he's symbolized with the wings and the serpent like a dragon. He looked like this strange creature in the sky. Okay, well, Moses made this image of the winged serpent on a pole in bronze or brass, and he put this up as a sign for the Israelites. If you get bitten by a serpent out here in the Sinai, here's where you go for first aid. What was it? Medical insignia, the caduceus symbol.
Right.
Of the healer, Hermes, the healer, Mercury, the healer, Raphael. Get it? The healer, the medical place. This is where you go for first aid. If you
two snakes wrapped around you.
Say again?
Two snakes wrapped around you.
In the earliest form, there's just one serpent.
Yeah.
Okay? And the serpent actually represents the tail of a comet-like object that was seen in the sky that was considered, and it had wings going out of the head of it, but a tail trailing behind it, which people interpreted as a being, okay, and which God assigned an angel to guide in his path.
Yeah.
Now, this object is the object that the ancients called Thoth, Adad, Hermes, Vulcan, Hephaestus, Athena, Minerva, Raphael, Tehuti, the Adad. I'm going to run out of names here, but you get the idea. Amu, he's got all kinds of names. Whatever culture you want to go to. Quetzalcoatl, the winged serpent, Kukulkan, you come to the Americans. But everybody's got, you track it all back, and you boil it down to the description, you look at the image, and you look at the history of it and what it symbolized. They're talking about Mercury. Okay, because that's what they remember having seen that looked like this. But actually, more than one object can look like this.
Yeah.
what most people don't realize is that comets typically have two tails.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with Hale-Bopp, they actually saw this because it was a fairly big one. It was about 25 miles in diameter, 40 kilometers.
Yeah.
It had a gaseous tail. It had a tail of debris or dust or dirt, okay? There is, or to put it a little differently, it had a solid tail and it had a tail of gas or vapors.
Mm-hmm.
And you heat up an object like that, you boil off some of the liquid, and that liquid in frozen state is full of dust and debris. It's dirty water. They call them dirty snowballs. When you melt the water and it turns into a gas in space and it vaporizes off and forms a tail, okay, you got that tail. But what happens to all the dust and dirt? Well, it trails behind the object as well, but being blown by the solar wind away from the sun, it trails behind it as well. But it will, because it's a different kind of material, it will make a separate trail behind it. And depending on what the object is doing, if that trail of debris is pretty heavy, then the solar wind won't be able to move it as much as it can move the thin vapor trail. So the thin vapor trail will separate from the solid trail. And if the object is rotating a little bit, it's got a little spin on it, then the solid the solid dust trail will become twisted like a serpent. It'll get coiled, so it'll come out behind there. It'll have a kind of a corkscrew look to it, whereas the vapor will be streamed away by the solar wind very easily and will be gone off maybe in a slightly different direction.
Yeah.
Now, this thing gets close to the Earth with the Earth's gravity and the magnetosphere and all of the other things that are going on. You can really separate the two of them. If you make a close pass by the Earth, the vapor trail will stream out around the head of the object,
Yes.
like a helmet with wings on it.
Yeah.
Okay? And the tail might corkscrew down below the object and get attracted by the Earth's gravity and even become grounded to the Earth. And you could have a spiral of like a serpent going up to the object in the heavens with the vapor coming off of it at the top. It would look just like a caduceus, you see. So it doesn't have to be Mercury. It can be any object that has enough stuff that can be vaporized and trail away from it and so forth. So what I think happened was that Mercury may have made a close approach to the Earth, according to the Gilgamesh epic and a lot of other ancient sources. That happened. And they saw this image in the sky. But any other significant Kuiper Belt object or comet that came near the Earth probably looked the same, which means the ancients could have gotten confused, because that's such a distinctive looking thing that if they saw more than one thing that looked like that, they might have easily, especially since they wouldn't have all come by at the same time, they would have had nothing but a drawing to go by and some verbal descriptions recorded in their traditions and legends and myths. So they'd look up in the sky and they'd see something, well, that looks like the same thing. That must be the same thing, because it's such an odd-looking thing.
Yeah.
So I think that they may have gotten that confused with some other things that came by, and especially if they also caused destructions. So it gets a little difficult after a while to tell the players without a scorecard. We really need to do a lot more research to pin down specifically what they were seeing, but they obviously were seeing something up there. And this thing, whatever it may have been, had diamonds associated with it. Because, going back to the story of Perseus here, I want to tell you specifically who I think this is. Because this is a real person. This is a guy who actually lived. He's not just anybody. He's midway between the genealogy of Adam and Jesus. He's actually in the royal line. I believe that this guy is King David.
Oh, my.
Okay. Now, the reason I think that this is King David is because the name Perseus is the Greek for the Hebrew Pharez, which is David's family line. He's of the house of Pharez of the tribe of Judah. And that's the royal line of Judah there, as opposed to Zerah. And this thing that he's holding in his hand here, in his left hand, is a large beheaded giant of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's supposed to be a female, the Medusa.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this word Goliath, which, you can look it up in your Hebrew dictionaries. They'll tell you it's a masculine name. It's the only masculine name that I've ever found that has a female ending on it, though. And I suspect that it's just an assumption that this is a masculine. I'm not so sure that it is. A lot of the Nephilim are described in legends and stories as being a little, how do I put this gently, unclear about their sexual orientation, having sex with both males and females.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that Goliath, with the female ending but the masculine gender,
Yes.
is on the fence, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't think this is exactly what people think it is. The Medusa was not exactly the sexiest lady in town. She's sort of on the fence, too. And, she's got a head of serpent, she's got wings, she's got claws, and I'm wondering if this scarab, this man cherub, which is a scorpion and is both male and female and is waiting at the feet of the woman as if to grab whatever she gives birth to, is not the same entity or family relation as the dragon in Revelation 12, which has that same job. Dragon has wings, it has claws, it's sort of related to serpents, it's considered, if you will, a reptile. In fact, it's called a serpent right there in Revelation 12. So I'm thinking that this is actually a parallel, that the Draco the dragon is there in the sky, also in front of Virgo, but right there we have at her feet, waiting where the child would be born between her feet, a creature that certainly might be something other than just the little scorpion that you'd step on. So I think that there is more to this image than people may have assumed. So Perseus has in his left hand a head. Now, it's actually Pharez. Now, if this is of Phoenician origin, it was Pharez. It wasn't Perseus. The original would be Pharez, the house of David, the house of his family line. That's the royal line that goes from adamantine Adam, the diamond in the rough in Hades, to Jesus, the offspring of Virgo, the virgin, that is Eve, and her line, the seed of the woman, okay, at the other end. And in the middle here we have King David. Now I wonder if there are any diamonds associated with him. I didn't think so at first. But wait here. They're saying that the knife or sickle or sword of Perseus was adamantine. In other words, made of diamond. Now that's odd. That's a big diamond. That's a very big diamond. And then we've got this other thing here. He's given a diamond wallet. Well, if you think back to David when he was battling Goliath, he didn't battle him with the sword. The sword belonged to Goliath. Instead, David had a little wallet or bag in which he had 5 smooth stones? But wait a minute. Maybe they weren't smooth. Maybe we should be translating that shiny as in diamonds. Maybe David's strategy was to penetrate the thick skull of Goliath, not with a pebble he found in a riverbed, but with a diamond, an adamantine stone, a stone so hard that it could penetrate even Goliath's skull. And that's what he fired at Goliath. Now, if that's the case, of course he had 4 others for his brothers. If that's the case, then the diamond extends from adamantine, Adam in Hades judging everybody harshly, through the line of Pharez, or Perseus, down to King David, holding in his hand here the head of the Medusa, that is Goliath, and he has his sword in his hand, the diamond sword of Goliath, which he cuts his head off with and stabs him with. He actually kills him 3 times, by the way. Now, the Gorgon was said to have been 3-headed, right? Well, he uses his sling to hit the Gorgon in the forehead with this stone, this adamantine stone. Then he takes the sword and he stabs him in the heart with it, and then he cuts off his head. So he kills him 3 times, just like the 3-headed Gorgon. Okay? Now, he's called he's called Goliath. And I got to thinking, what if Goliath and the Gorgon, the Medusa, were connected together in some way? Suppose these 2 names are not as far apart as we think. Now, Goliath has 4 letters to it: Gimel, Lamed, Yod, and I think it's Taw. I don't have that identified here, but anyway, it's got 4 letters to it. And the first part, Gal, means basically a head. It could also mean a giant or something tall, and it can mean exiled. And the ending there can mean it, or if my interpretation is correct, it could mean a woman. It can also mean cut off, cut away, cut out, hence beheaded. So basically, the name Goliath means the giant beheaded woman, or, if you will, male-female creature, which, of course, all angels are. And hence, the offspring of an angel or a Nephilim giant might be considered a dual-sexual creature. Now, Medusa is an interesting name. Medusa could mean, the M at the front of it could mean a giant. If it comes from a Phoenician origin, then it would have a Hebraic or Semitic language base to it. So Medusa would mean a giant, dus-ah. Now the A at the end is a feminine ending in Hebrew, just like the TH ending is. So we're looking at a similar kind of meaning there. Dus, D-U-S, is a root that means, believe it or not, evil, cut off, or severed. So we have a giant or great, evil, cut off, or severed woman, hence a beheaded woman. So the meaning of Medusa and the meaning of Goliath are the same in Hebrew. And that means that we are looking at the same story here. This is the story of Goliath, and it is the story of Perseus. And the diamonds may be the key to the story, because if the wallet is diamond, and if the sword is diamond, or the knife is diamond, or the sickle is diamond, and that seems to be what the legends are telling us, then it may be that David was able to slay the Gorgon, or Goliath, using diamond, that the key, the trick to all of this was the diamond. And remember when I said all of this relates to Mercury, which is to say to Raphael. But wait a second here. David isn't wearing armor when he goes out. I mean, they tried to put some armor on him, but, he shuffled it off, and he went out there with nothing but his sling and his little bag of stones. And he goes out there with this giant staring at him and laughing at him. And, the Philistines are in derision, and David's all alone there. He's got his little sling. And he puts a diamond in there, and he slings it at him. And, of course, when the guy gets hit in the forehead with this thing, Goliath realizes it's like being shot by a Magnum, a pistol or something, or is that a revolver? I don't know. I don't know much about guns, but anyway, shot by a good heavy caliber bullet, and it penetrates through his forehead, and he keels over. And David rushes over, and he picks up his diamond sword, the Goliath's diamond sword, and he chops his head off, and he stabs him in the heart with it. So the sword, if the sword is coming from Raphael, then Goliath has Raphael's sword. But wait a minute. Raphael's sword would be the sword of an angel. And that's not an ordinary sword. Whatever David's picked up here isn't your average everyday sword. I think what he's got is a shamir, a sword or a device that puts out like a laser. It's like a laser sword. And it can cut stone without iron tools, if you follow me. There's a tradition about this thing called the shamir. And apparently this device was in the hands of this giant who was one of the few people, I guess, who could easily wield this thing and use it. So just imagine the Israelites facing a guy with, now, a diamond in this case would mean a laser diamond, a diamond that could laze. I don't even know diamonds could laze, but apparently this is what the tradition seems to be indicating. And this device, whatever it is, that looked like a sword, and it could cut through anything, was what David then used to kill Goliath 2 more times. So the first time he kills the mortal life of this man, of this creature, this being, with a diamond stone through the forehead. But then he uses an angelic weapon, sword, Raphael's sword, to kill him 2 more times. Well, remember what the Gorgon was? It had one mortal head, which was the Medusa, and then it had 2 immortal heads. But it says he killed the Gorgon. It killed an immortal being? Well, apparently, by killing the body, he then was free to also kill the angelic part of this being, of this Nephilim creature. So this is a story of 2 diamonds, so to speak. The diamond stone that David flung at him, the shiny stone, or as we say, smooth polished stone, and the diamond sword, which may have been some kind of angelic laser sword that this creature was carrying. Now, the story goes that David took this sword as a souvenir and took it back to his tent and kept it. And later on, we find that the house of David, that the line of Nathan, which lives up in Galilee, which is the line from which Jesus comes, and Joseph of Arimathea and Mary James and Jude, all of those guys, that is the line that begins to become the supplier of weapons to Israel. They sort of get a monopoly on the metals and swords and shields and so forth. And boy, if you had a weapon like that, just imagine what you would do in designing your helmets and your shields. You would try to make them as resistant to that high technology as you could. And you'd study that high technology, and you'd probably try to keep it secret. You wouldn't want everybody to know you even had it, because, they might try to, somebody might try to find a way to get at it, steal it from you, and then be used against Israel. So when you've got an ultra weapon like that, you don't even want people to know you have it. So I think that's why the story of David and Goliath that has come down to us has kind of left out, perhaps, some of the more esoteric aspects of what happened, because they didn't want anybody to really understand what it was that Goliath was holding in his hand as David went out there to meet him with a slingshot. And you can see why Goliath was so confident. If he had an angelic sword, if he wasn't just big, but he had a laser sword, no wonder King Saul was afraid of this guy. And no wonder God was amazed at the courage of David in going out there with a slingshot to face him. That seed is now suddenly a far more awesome confrontation than we thought. And now we can see why the ancients celebrated this moment by putting David up in the heavens in the side of Perseus and elevated him to this status and that sword, which he is wielding over his head. In some drawings, it's on, he's holding it at his side there, at his right arm. But that is a very amazing situation. And there are 19 stars in the sign of Perseus. Do you know how many stars are devoted to this amazing sword? None. Not a single star is devoted to showing the sword. Yet the sword is included in all the stories because it has to be. How else could he have severed the head from the Gorgon, which is the whole point? This angel, Raphael, had a helmet of invisibility. Now, do angels appear and disappear? They sure do. They will appear suddenly in front of somebody, and then they will vanish. So he had a helmet of invisibility. He had his laser sword, just like the two cherubim at the entrance to the Garden of Eden, who had a flaming sword which turned in every direction to guard the way to the tree of life. Here, that Shamir is located. And by the way, that sword is called a cherub or cherub. So the cherub man would be the sword man, or it could be the angel man, which would be a Nephilim. So we have a creature here that seems to be the son of the dragon, if you will. Might refer to the beast there in the book of Revelation. Might refer to the creature that is being held in other words, in Perseus's left hand here. And of course, we've got the wings on the feet. The angels can fly, we're told. Now there is the shield that reflects like a mirror. The shield that's polished so brilliantly that it can be used as a reflector. Now, gee, isn't that odd? Why would a heavenly being using a laser weapon have a shield that reflects light? Oh, I guess that does make perfect sense, doesn't it? And that's the story of David and the diamond sword.
Mm-hmm.
the slingshot.
That's fascinating, Olaf. You know, there's so many of these mythological tales that, you know, they're just myths. No, they're not.
Well, this one isn't over.
Oh, yeah.
This one's about to come back to haunt all of us.
Oh, dear.
It's just the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
I go into a lot more about Perseus and its significance and what it's about to mean to us and what it has to do with the planet Mars and what's about to happen to Mars, which is also going to get hit on its forehead by a stone, a very big stone. Yet again, it's been hit several times. It's going to be hit again. And this time, it's going to change its orbit and threaten the Earth. And, I go into, we don't have time to do all that now. We're already way over probably a proper length for a file here. But I've got a whole bunch of files over at before2012andbeyond.com that talk about Drac, D-R-A-C, and about the sword, the glittering sword in the heavens, and about Mars and so forth. And we've got a whole bunch of those on our CDs. There's just tons of material on this. This is one of the major themes of the Bible. And, if you doubt what I'm talking about, go to Isaiah 34, and you will see that the end times involve a sword, a glittering sword. And I maintain that sword is glittering because of diamond dust in its tail, and it's not on this earth. We have a lot of information on this. This is a rapidly developing area of research, and I mean literally day by day. And I think you can testify to that because I keep you more or less informed, Georgianne, every week of the new discoveries. Yeah. And this is just continuing to explode with new information. So we are on the trail of what is about to happen. I believe within the next 5 years, well within the next 5 years, we are going to see the final fulfillment of all of these biblical stories that are talking about the adamantine sword, this sickle in David's hand, this glittering sword in the heavens, these prophecies about Mars, which are scattered throughout the Bible. All of these events that are related to this are about to occur. I wouldn't just say right before our very eyes. You're going to have these things coming through your house. Mm-hmm. You're going to see diamonds all around you. And they are, like I say, they are harder than anything else. So it's going to be hard to keep them out. And that's why you see the specific prophecy, one of them about this in the book of Revelation, this particular point. It says, rocks fall on us, and they hit themselves in the caves of the mountains, Revelation 6. Mm-hmm. And the sixth seal is opened, and they have all of these rocks falling on them from the heavens. Yeah. That's from the face of him who sits upon the throne. Yeah. That would be what? King David's heir? Adam's descendant, the diamond throne, the one in the sea of glass that looks like a big diamond or crystal. That guy, it's the emerald throne technically, but this is a gemstone throne, and they're looking at gems in the heavens. They are worried about rocks falling on them from the sky. They are anticipating something that is going to cause them to die if they don't hide in the proper places at the proper times. And this is what I believe these prophecies are getting ready to occur within the next 5 years. This particular group. Now, this is not the second coming, but people will think it is, which is the point of that passage in Revelation. We are headed into a period of great deception where people will be pointing to these heavenly events, what God calls a strong delusion.
Yes. Well, he says he's going to send a strong delusion.
Oh, yeah, this is the strong delusion that's coming, that people will misinterpret as the end of the age, the end of the world, and therefore the being you see coming from the heavens at that time, people will misinterpret as Jesus. It is not Jesus. This is not the second coming. You've got to sort all this out and understand what's going on here. We're going to be hit with a bunch of false Christs and false prophets, just as the Bible prophesied.
Yeah.
More than one.
Yes, I think you're right.
You got to look at the details. People look past all these little details in the text, and they don't pay attention to them. They just try to read the text like they're speed reading it or something.
Yeah.
You got to look at the details. If it's in plural, it means something. It's not an accident. It's plural for a reason. Okay, so the only good news I can give you is that oil's down to under $37 a barrel.
Yeah, well, you kind of predicted that,
Yeah, well, that's what we said over a year ago. I told you it would get down here. It just we had to get those speculators out of the oil market. So now that they're out of there, I would say we can pretty much say at this point that the speculators are pretty much on the sidelines, despite what you hear. If they were in there, believe me, the oil price would not be where you see it today. The speculators would have been thinking, oh, boy, here's an opportunity to make a buck. I mean, there's a few, I'm sure, hanging around, but it's nothing like it used to be. And what we're looking at here is a period where we're going to be put through hell on earth so that people will think they're going through a tribulation. We'll be seeing messianic figures. They're already promoting this idea in people's heads that Barack Obama is a messianic figure, and they want the Christians to believe that he's the Antichrist and so forth. He's not. They're going to try to make you think that other people are the Antichrist. They'll trot out several candidates. They don't care which one you believe in.
That's right.
They really don't.
Yeah.
Will give you as many antichrists as it takes for them to accomplish their goal of deception.
Mm-hmm.
So that only those who have a love of the truth, so as to be saved, will not be deceived.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's, a love of the truth means, how much is the truth worth to you? How much do you love the truth? That's the hard part. Are you willing to go back and dig into it and research it and study it? Well, that's what your pastors, your priests, your rabbis, your ministers, that's what their job is. You pay them to do that. They're not doing it. What are they doing? They're telling you to celebrate Christmas on December 25th. Or they're telling you to ignore Christmas altogether. And to pay no attention to these things and say, oh, it's just a secular holiday. And then what they don't tell you is that Christmas is actually, now here's where we have a whole bunch of people get angry at me. Christmas is actually the birth of the Antichrist.
Yeah.
That's the day he was born.
Yeah.
And people don't even realize what they're celebrating here. And, you tell them, and they say, oh, well, but, I grew up with this, my family traditions. We want to get together and have dinner, How you down there, you? Where's that broom? I'm going to hit that nasty man with my broom. People don't want to hear. They don't have a love of the truth.
No, they don't.
Prefer the myths. They prefer the delusions. Where in your Bible does it tell you to celebrate Christmas? Where in your Bible does it say that Jesus was born in winter, December, or at that time of the year? It never tells you any such thing. It doesn't even tell you that the Magi are there when he's born.
Yeah.
But, there's Bill O'Reilly having a conniption over the State House in Washington State up there in Olympia, Washington, where they got a little placard the atheists put up next to the creche scene. They got the baby Jesus, and they got the Magi, and there's Jesus lying in the manger, and there's the Magi showing up at the same time, which, of course, is, he's over a year old at that point. It says so right there in Matthew. Well, we don't care about facts. Stop confusing us with facts and information. It never says that the Magi come from 3 different countries. It says they go back to their country, one place. Not a whole bunch of places, one place. Returned home by another route, but they came from one place and they go back to one place. They're not coming from 4 different or 3 different parts of the world, I should say. They don't represent the white race, the black race, and the yellow race. You know,
right.
This is this wonderful mythology we've created that's politically correct. You know, that isn't who these people are. These are the wise ones, the Gokim in the Hebrew. Matthew's not in Hebrew, of course, but in the Old Testament it talks about the Magi, and they're called the Gokim, the wise ones. They made people gawk, okay? And these guys, you know who was in charge of them in Daniel's day? Daniel. Daniel was put in charge of them. And that calendar that they're following to get to Jesus, that calendar was Daniel's calendar. Daniel and the Magi worked that calendar out. And that is the new moon calendar of the Babylonians. And the very tablets that they worked out, we actually have those tablets. Those Babylonian new moon tablets that those Magi who came to visit Jesus, those tablets are actually in the British Museum. And I don't know, every single one of them is still there at this particular instant. You know, sometimes they have little traveling expositions and so forth. But those tablets and the tablet for that very night or that very day, that sighting of when Jesus was born, where the new moon was underneath the feet of Virgo, that very tablet is there in the British Museum where they were watching the moon underneath of the sun as the sun was rising at the feet of Virgo, as the sun was setting, I should say. And that new moon sighting at sunset there, as Jesus was being born, those Magi were actually carving that tablet that very moment. They weren't sitting around the manger. Sorry. But, you know, I mean, the ironies of history. Here we got some hard physical evidence from these characters, and yet people prefer the mythology that you can't link up with any hard physical evidence to the stuff that we can actually document. And it's just amazing. That date, September 10th, 3 BC, that evening there, the following morning was September 11th. You know, we were attacked on the morning of September 11th. If that had been the same Hebrew calendar date, why, that would have been the anniversary in Hebrew, but at least it was the anniversary in our calendar of the birth of Jesus. But it was the 2003rd anniversary, 9/11. And this year's anniversary was the 2010th anniversary, I believe. So last September. And, you know, it varies every year in the Hebrew calendar date. Now, the Romans didn't see it that way. You know what day it was in the Roman calendar? It was September the 8th. Because the Romans had screwed up their leap years, and they had to go back and recount everything. So, in the Roman calendar, what we would reckon as the evening of September 10th was the evening of September 8th. And the church had a tradition where they celebrated something called the Nativity of Mary on September 8th. They still do, by the way, to this day. Only it wasn't Mary's birth, it was Mary giving birth to Jesus. So they actually kept the record in the old Roman calendar from that day. And that was handed down as a tradition in the Roman archives, and the church kept it, but it lost track of what it meant. It had no idea what September 8th referred to. And you can look this up in books about the Catholic holy days and feast days and so forth, and you will see that they have no idea where this September 8th date for the birth of Mary comes from. But you do, because I just explained it. And it's not the only place. There are several other places where we can document from the Bible where and when Jesus was born, and this whole sequence of events. Luke's Gospel has a whole bunch about it, and I have all this detailed on my CDs, and you don't want me to get started on that because that's another 2 or 3 hour discussion. So we know when Jesus was born. We also know that exchanging gifts, expecting to get as much in return as you're giving, Jesus says, well, you have your reward. That's not giving.
Yeah.
He doesn't consider that giving. But real giving is giving to someone who can't give you something back in return. That's real giving. Give to those who don't have anything and can't give you anything back. That's the kind of giving that God seeks. He says, bring the widow and the orphan into your house and feed them on Yom Kippur. He says in Isaiah. He says, that's the fast that I seek, Okay, don't you eat, but feed somebody who is hungry on that day. Bring the widow and the orphan into your house and feed them on that day. There are other layers of meaning to that passage, obviously. And in the book of Revelation, in chapter 11, it talks about the two witnesses and what happens when the two witnesses are killed. These two witnesses of God are killed. And what do the people do? They exchange gifts and make merry.
Yeah.
Wonder what day that was.
Oh, gee.
That the people who are killing the Christian or Jewish witnesses here, what are they doing exchanging gifts and making merry on that day? Could it be because the two witnesses were condemning Christmas and telling the Christians of the world not to celebrate Christmas? And people said, why? Who do they think they are? They must be false witnesses.
Yeah.
And so they killed them. But those two guys weren't false. There probably will be two false witnesses who come first. But you know what? It's that old story of the boy who cried wolf? He comes out and he cries wolf. There's no wolf. People got all excited. And they said, they're disappointed. There's no wolf. And the next day he comes out and he cries wolf again. No wolf. And people got all excited. Now, the third time he cries wolf, nobody listens. This time there's a real wolf. Well, I think that's what's going to happen. We're going to have some false witnesses who are going to show up in Jerusalem. And these false prophets are going to prophesy. Some of the things they say may come true, especially those things that can be controlled by intelligence agencies.
Or technology.
Yeah, or technology. Yeah. Some of those things they say may happen, but they're not the real two witnesses of God or of Jesus Christ, which is specifically what the passage says. And they're not in the right place at the right time, which, of course, I've explained on numerous things that we have on our CDs. But these two witnesses show up, and, after all of the false witnesses, people have gotten to the point where they don't believe it anymore. So when the real two witnesses show up, they may think that they're phony too. And when they start condemning Christmas, my goodness, well, they must be false witnesses.
Well, Olaf, look at all these people, that are, they're down to nothing. No money. Their houses are being foreclosed on. Their cars are being picked up for non-payment. And they're worried about buying Christmas presents for their kids.
Well,
if they told their kids the truth to begin with, they wouldn't be worrying about this.
If we would tell our kids the truth to begin with about Christmas and Easter eggs and Easter bunnies and all the rest of this stuff, if we would tell them the truth from the beginning, not only would we not have to worry about that kind of problem, we also wouldn't have to worry about our kids when they got to be teenagers not believing not only in Santa Claus, but not believing in Jesus either. Because if the story of Christmas having to do with Santa Claus is not true, they pretty much apply that to Jesus as well. So they end up becoming agnostics and atheists by the time they graduate from high school. And then we wonder why they're doing drugs, why they don't listen to their parents and don't respect them anymore, and why they're running around joining weird religious cults and engaging in all kinds of sexual behavior. And we wonder why they don't take the Bible seriously. Well, what did you expect? When you started to tie the truth of God and mix it with the lies of all of these stupid stories about Santa Claus and Easter bunnies and all this crap, and you dipped the Word of God in that garbage, and you thought you were going to get away with it, and God said, well, beware, because your children will turn away from you. You can go back to the first 5 books of the Bible, and he talks about what's going to happen to your children as a result of mixing the worship of God with the worship of the heathen and the ways they worship their gods. exchanging gifts, setting up trees. Jeremiah 10 talks about cutting down a tree, bringing an evergreen into your house, propping it up with a stand, decorating it with silver and gold at the change of the seasons. Gee, and what does he say about that? He hates it. Don't do this. Don't follow the way of the heathen.
That's right.
In Deuteronomy 12, he says, do not worship me the way the heathen worship their gods. I detest these things. I hate these things. Don't do these things. And the very next prophecy in Deuteronomy 13, it's a passage about what you do to false prophets. But it actually is the law which was used by the Sanhedrin to condemn Jesus. And there's actually a prophecy of the crucifixion in there, what was done to Jesus. So these are sacred things. And when we mix those with these pagan things, go back to Leo and Virgo there, and what's waiting in front of them? A scorpion, a scarab beetle, a dung beetle, with literally a ball of excrement in its mouth in the Egyptian version, which is Libra. And you can actually see the sign of Libra. See that little orb there? A ball of excrement in the beetle's mouth, in his claws. These are the pagan symbols where God is trying to show you this dragon before the virgin waiting to devour the child when it comes forth. Look at the contrast between the birth of the Diamond King from the virgin, the pure virgin, and the dung beetle and the scorpion and the dragon waiting to eat a baby. Look at the contrast between these two spiritual realms. Why would you want to have anything to do with worshiping the one who is born in the sign of Scorpio?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. And today is the cusp, by the way, of the stinger of the scorpion as we're making this recording. So I think there's a fitting moment here. This is the black hole at the heart of the Milky Way galaxy. There is nothing about this that people should worship or honor or feel good about. This is the sign of death. This is the sign of pain and destruction. There's nothing good in it. And this is not something that we should be honoring. And yet people, for some reason, because of sentimentality with their childhood or whatever, try going home again. You can't. I wish you could, I wish we could go and recapture all of those gooey, wonderful feelings we had as kids, at Christmas time and so forth. But you can never recapture that. So you try to somehow or other give those feelings to your children and transfer them to the next generation. And what you're doing is you're transferring all kinds of heathen, pagan practices and ideas to little innocent children and spoiling them, giving them all kinds of gifts without them having to earn it or having any idea of the real value of it. You're spoiling them spiritually. You're distorting their understanding of reality. You're telling them lies. You're destroying your credibility in their eyes once they grow up and realize that you were lying to them and that they couldn't trust you or believe what you were saying.
Yeah, like when you
have any idea how?
Yeah, when you lose a tooth, the tooth fairy comes. Oh my God.
What is wrong with telling your kids the truth? That's the most precious gift you can give anybody.
That's right.
Is the truth, especially in this world of deception and disinformation and illusion. People say, I can't wait to go to the latest movie or read the latest novel. Well, by definition, none of those things are true. None of them are true. And while a lot of these movies are very interesting in what they may reveal about what the CIA or somebody is trying to program us to believe in, whether it's The Day the Earth Stood Still or Close Encounters of the Third Kind or whatever other movie might be, Deep Impact might be influenced by hidden agendas out there. And those things are very interesting, and the Indiana Jones stuff and so forth are very interesting from that perspective. Yeah. Remember, it's fiction, and by definition, fiction is a lie. It's not true. And here we have a book of truth that God gave us, and He wants to teach us things. And it says that the stars, that He has stretched out like a curtain, and He has given the meaning and the interpretation of these symbols to Seth, and who has handed it down through the priesthood, ultimately, of Levi, and these things were, of course, picked up, and we can see how they were corrupted. We saw the story of Perseus here by the pagans. I'm way long here, aren't I?
Yeah.
Anyway, all of this stuff is corrupting the true story which God wanted us to have. And when you understand what the true story is, it's much more interesting than the pagan lies about it.
That's right.
Much more interesting.
That's right.
And it's going to have its climax, if you will, or at least partially, here in the next few years. Virtually every person listening here, unless you get hit by a truck or something, is going to live through what I'm talking about here, and what I talk about on all those CDs and the files that we have over at Before 2012 and Beyond.com. Those things get into stories about, the Mars prophecies and so forth. That's all in our future. Okay? Now, I don't know if we're going to live to see the second coming. That's further down the road. But we're entering into this period where the age is coming to an end, and a whole bunch of things are going to be happening.
Yeah.
I can't even begin to touch on all of this stuff in these audio files because, look, that CDs now, we have over 100 hours. I think we must be up to 200 hours now of files that are on the CDs in MP3 format, covering Mars, covering when Jesus was really born, when He was really crucified, the two witnesses, the mark of the beast, all of this stuff. The fake two witnesses, the hidden agendas and so forth, the UFO stuff, all of that. It's just, there's so much stuff out there, and it is so frustrating because we live in a world of lies. Yeah. We live in a world of fiction and of movies and TV shows, and that we're surrounded by stuff that isn't true, and so little of what you get to hear. People think the news is true.
Oh, gee.
They actually believe.
Yeah, they think that.
They think that that's the part that isn't fiction.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I know.
And now they're coming out with this TV thing that they can have. It can make it look like people are standing in your room talking to you.
Oh yeah, the holographic laser.
Yeah, and the porn industry will go nuts with that. There isn't a technology out there. I don't know of one unless it's a KitchenAid food mixer that that they haven't figured out to use for wicked and evil purposes.
Absolutely.
It just.
Yeah. Well, look, when you got wicked people, they will find a way to use almost even a turkey baster can be used for some sort of evil.
Oh, yeah.
They have figured out a way to corrupt just about anything, and that is their goal, is corruption of innocence, whether it's children or adults.
Take the mother out of the home, what do you have? You have a flop house. Who in their right mind would send a little child to a nursery school?
Who in their right mind would send a little child to a public school where there are teachers who hate Christianity and who will spend much of their time during the day trying to ridicule the Bible and its ideas and so forth to a little child?
Yeah, and sodomize the child. It makes me nuts. I can't. I just don't understand it.
Innocence is the goal. In whatever form they find innocence, they want to corrupt it.
Well, they can't stand innocence. Innocence has a very special spiritual energy.
And if they can recruit parents to corrupt the innocence of children,
oh yeah,
lies, and fantasies and so forth. I don't even want to get into who Santa Claus really was, because that would take another.
Yeah, well, just think of the name Claus.
Yeah, just think of Satan's claws, and you've got a close idea.
Yeah, you got a clue.
Now back to Libra again, and who that really represents, and when he was really born, and what all these symbols stand for. I mean, it's a long story, and it's more than we'll ever be able to get into in files like these. But I mean, the problem is that we are surrounded by so much disinformation, misinformation, and outright lies.
Right.
That there is very little truth that is available to people.
Mm-hmm.
And, unfortunately, I mean, even now, the history of the United States in classrooms in the United States isn't being taught anymore. If you thought Germany was hiding its history from its kids, the United States now is hiding its history from its children in history classes in schools.
Well, the history's been hidden even when I was in school.
He who gets to rewrite history gets to reprogram people's minds and distort their view of reality. And if you can change and distort the history, which of course is what all these myths of Perseus and so forth were trying to do, they didn't want people to know that's about King David cutting off the head of a Nephilim giant. Why, with a laser sword.
Mm-hmm.
See, and they started going down that trail of fudging the history and keeping people from finding out what was really going on. And the further away you got from the truth, the more corrupted it got. And then each guy told the story, and it got more corrupted and more corrupted, until the final versions, as I'm reading some of these to you from this book here, they just get so far removed from the original that you almost lose touch with it until you start looking at the little details and going back and reconstructing it. And then you begin to see where it came from. But, we lose all of that, and we get so corrupted from it that we can't see it anymore at all. We got to I shouldn't get into all of that. But anyway, people have got to understand that we live in a sea of delusion. Are in the matrix. You have all those tubes plugged into your head. YouTube and your Wi-Fi and your earphones of your all of this garbage that is being plugged into you that is coming from the matrix. Create a false reality for you. One thing I liked about those movies was that it captured the real sense of what it is like to be trapped, as it were, in a fake world that isn't real.
Oh, but people love Plato's Cave.
Well, they get into the computer games and so forth. Anything they can do to keep you out of truth and reality. They don't want you to get into that, because if you start worrying about what is true and what is real, and you start thinking about the real situation that we're all in and what they're doing to us and where this is all leading and what's going to happen, then this shaky pyramid of control begins to crumble at the base. And they no longer have the ability to control and manipulate everybody. Look at this election of Barack Obama, where the majority of the voters who voted for Barack Obama thought that the Republicans controlled the House and the Senate. How totally deluded were those Obama voters? That is just absolutely amazing that people could be so far removed from reality.
They don't even know what communism is.
They don't even know who represents them. And yet they're deciding who gets to rule the world, basically. I mean, the most powerful job in the world is President of the United States, and has enormous influence over the rest of the world.
Well, Olaf, they want to change. Believe me, they're going to get it. And boy, are they going to get it.
When Mars comes by, everything changes. And, of course, they will take advantage of that situation.
Oh, sure they will.
I mean, there's, again, a big story that we can't get into here. The documentation for the Mars stuff takes many, many more hours than we could go into on one file here. And I just hope that people have the good sense to go to the other website there before 2012 and beyond. and check out what they're offering over there. Now they should have. I haven't. And I've had the ice storm and all the stuff and the snowstorms and everything shoveling like crazy, and I don't know what's going on over there. I haven't had a chance to check to see. Do you know if they've got that offer posted yet?
No, I don't.
You don't know if that's over there? Well, folks, keep going over there and looking. We've got that offer. And look, if you subscribe to my CDs, then later on when you subscribe to Georgianne's CDs, you will automatically be grandfathered in to get this series that we're talking about, the Lost Secrets of the Ages series. It's a 7-part series. It's about 15 hours long. Hey, look, the Secrets of the Ages are that's amazing what we got on there. It's amazing I squeezed as much in as we did. That is, you can't buy it, but it's free if you will subscribe to both sets of CDs. And, my CDs, of course, are already out there, but as soon as yours are available, we should be able to put together that offer for you. You'll be able to get those as well. But you can get started on this by going over right now and subscribing to the CDs that I've already got there. And what that will do is it'll lock you in so that you'll be able to subscribe to, I think they got a sales going on over there at the moment too, at before2012 and beyond.com. Boy, that just rolls right off your tongue, doesn't it? Anyway, if you go over there, then as soon as you subscribe to Georgianne, as soon as those are available, and you're already subscribed to mine, that'll kick in and you'll start receiving the Lost Secrets of the Ages series as well. So, this is a good time to get started on all of that, and it won't cost you 1 penny extra to do it that way than it will when the actual offer comes. So I encourage you to go do that now and get started on these things so that because we don't have a whole lot of time left here. We're getting down to within 3.5 years shortly. In the 2009 will be within 3.5 years of what I believe is the Mars date.
Yeah.
What that means is they've got to run by their scenario of the tribulation, of the false prophet, of the false Christ, of the mark of the beast, of all of this stuff. They're going to run through that before that happens because they won't be able to afterwards. So all of this fake stuff that they're planning, whether it's Project Bluebeam or any of these other things you hear about, I'm not entirely sure what that is. I think it's some sort of laser thing or holograph. But whatever it is, that's going to happen soon. And the President of the United States, apparently, if nothing changes, is going to be Obama. So my guess is they're going to drag him into this. Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. That's not the mark of the beast. None of this stuff that you're going to be hearing about is the real thing. You've got to have Mars come by before these things can happen. You've got to cut short the days. I show you all these prophecies, what the timing is. And, of course, most people won't know.
No, and they don't believe the Bible, see.
They won't. Well, you see, that's the problem. You've got to go through this detail by detail, and that's the hard part. It does take time to go through it. And, you can't educate others if you don't know it yourself.
That's right.
Some people say, well, I send them over to your website. I haven't got even 1% of what I've found on my website.
I know.
Even a fraction of, it's a fraction of 1%, but it's less than 1%. The vast majority of the stuff and all the new stuff is, I haven't touched that website in quite some time. I just don't have time to do the website anymore. There's just too much happening. The audio is the only way I can get the stuff out fast.
Yeah. Olaf, let me ask you please to close the show tonight. I'm having a lot of trouble with my throat right now.
Well, let's do that then.
Okay.
Well, God bless you, everybody, and we want to thank you for being faithful and for loving the truth and being concerned about these things and for listening to these files on the ByteShow.com. We try to keep you as updated as we can here, but there's just a ton of material. I produce far more than you hear on the Byte Show each month. and this is just a small part of it. And you got Joe Farrell and David Seeloff and so many other great people here. So just tell everybody you know about it. Email them the Byte Show link. Get them to go and listen to the site. This is where we are trying to get the message out to you. God bless you, Georgianne. God bless all of you who are listening. Pray for your families. Pray for your nation. Pray for our world. Share the truth with people. Let them know that there are ways that they can find out what's going on, and share those links with people so that they can do that too. So God bless you all. Thank you all for listening. Good night.
Good night.